On a frozen night when the world outside was silent and buried in snow, a little girl whispered to the glass, "If I don't save myself, no one will." Her bruises told a story no child should ever have to live. And yet, through the storm, her cry broke into the heart of a man who thought he had nothing left to give. He was a millionaire CEO, hollowed by loss, his life reduced to numbers and empty rooms. But on this night, destiny placed him in her path. What began as a stranger's cry in the dark would spark a bond powerful enough to change both of their lives forever. This is not just a story of survival. It is a story of healing, second chances, and the unshakable power of love. Stay with us, and if you believe in the strength of hope, subscribe to Hidden Echo Stories. The wind clawed at the windows of the old house, rattling each pane as if it wanted to break inside. Midnight in Minnesota was unforgiving, the kind of night where snow buried the streets and silence pressed down like a weight. Yet inside the Turner home, silence was shattered. The air was raw and heavy, cut through with the sharp bark of Carl Benson's voice and the pounding rhythm of his boots against the floor. His anger filled the walls, making even the furniture seem to shrink back. 9-year-old Emma lay curled on the wooden boards, her cheek pressed to the cold surface. She wished she could vanish into it, become invisible, dissolve into the cracks where no one could find her. Her ribs ached, her breath came shallow, and still she did not let herself cry. She knew from experience that sound only gave him more power. Every muffled sob, every gasp, only made his rage last longer. Carl towered above her, the smell of alcohol rolling off him. His shadow bent and twisted across the peeling wallpaper, monstrous and enormous. He shouted about shoes left by the door, as if a pair of sneakers was enough reason to hurt a child. His boot lashed out, catching her in the side. Pain shot through her small body, so sharp it stole her breath. She bit down on her lip until the metallic tang of blood filled her mouth. Emma did not look at him. Instead, from the corner of her vision, she saw her mother. Denise stood near the stove, arms crossed, silk robe pulled tightly around her, eyes fixed not on her daughter's suffering but on the flicker of the gas flame. On her lips rested the faintest smile. It was not warm. It was not protective. It was cold, distant, as if she were watching a play rather than her child being beaten. That smile carved deeper wounds in Emma than any bruise. The kitchen smelled faintly of burnt coffee, a sour edge that mingled with fear. The walls were lined with faded wallpaper curling at the seams. The whole house seemed tired, sagging, as though it too wanted to escape. Emma thought of the snow piling outside, blanketing the streets, softening the city. She wished it could bury her pain, cover the marks on her skin, and erase the silence that clung to her mother. In the fragile corners of her mind, she imagined a world where she could disappear beneath the falling snow, where footsteps never found her, where voices never rose in anger. She clung to the memory of a broken toy car she had once loved, pretending her palm still held its steering wheel. In her imagination, she drove far away, across frozen fields, into a place where kindness lived. Her body trembled, but she refused to let him see fear. At last, Carl stumbled away, muttering curses as he slammed down the hall. The house exhaled into silence, yet that silence was not peaceful. It was full of tension, filled only by the buzz of the refrigerator and the ticking of a distant clock. Denise lingered a moment, her eyes flickering over her daughter's small body. For an instant, Emma thought her mother might move toward her. But then Denise turned, robe sweeping behind her, and walked out. The sound of her slippers on the linoleum was softer than the storm outside, but it felt louder than any betrayal. Emma lay still, listening, waiting until the footsteps disappeared. Her chest rose and fell in uneven rhythm. She counted the seconds, fighting back tears, forcing herself to move. Each joint screamed in protest as she pushed herself upright. She limped to the kitchen window. Frost had crept across the glass in intricate patterns, and beyond it the storm raged, wild and unrelenting. She pressed her palm against the icy surface, feeling the cold bite into her skin. It was real. It was honest. And it was still kinder than what she had just endured. "If only I could disappear," she whispered to the night. The words fogged against the glass. For a moment she imagined herself shrinking small enough to cling to a snowflake, carried away into a sky where no one could hurt her. But reality tugged her back, sharp and merciless. The pain in her ribs, the raw sting in her lip, the silence of her mother, it was all too real. Still, something inside her stirred. Fear was familiar, but so was survival. She swallowed, steadied herself, and moved toward the back door. Her fingers shook as they reached for the latch, stiff from months of disuse. She begged it not to squeal, biting harder into her lip when it groaned faintly. She froze, listening. The house held still, no footsteps, no voice, just the hum of the storm beyond. Her breath caught as she pushed the door open. A rush of frigid air enveloped her, shocking her lungs. She hesitated on the threshold, her bare feet already stinging, but then she stepped forward. The cold burned at first, then numbed, but it was freedom. Each crunch of snow beneath her felt like defiance, like proof that she could keep moving. The storm slapped against her skin, plastered her hair to her face, blurred her vision with tears that froze before they could fall. Yet still she walked. Emma wrapped her arms around herself, her small body nearly swallowed by the night. She passed the old swing set, its chains groaning in the wind, and for a heartbeat she remembered laughter from years ago, before her real father was gone, before Carl, before everything changed. She whispered into the storm again and again, "If I do not save myself, nobody will." Each step carried her farther into the snow, her footprints fading almost as soon as they were made. She did not look back. The house behind her dissolved into shadow, swallowed by the storm. Ahead the world was white and endless. She was terrified, aching, and yet more alive than she had ever been inside those walls. For the first time she was choosing. For the first time she was free. The city slept beneath a heavy blanket of snow, the streets empty except for the glow of dim streetlights. Downtown Minneapolis looked like a frozen kingdom, beautiful yet lifeless, where silence echoed louder than sound. Inside, a black Escalade parked on the edge of the city. Ben Walker sat motionless, hands gripping the steering wheel though he had not moved in hours. The heater hummed, the leather interior warm, but he felt no comfort in it. Ben was a man who had once been larger than life. His name had been etched on skyscrapers, celebrated in business magazines, his presence commanded in boardrooms. Yet now all of that power meant nothing. Years earlier, his daughter Olivia had slipped away from him, taken by an illness no wealth could cure. Since then his life had become hollow, a routine of empty victories, work, gym, meetings, dinners where laughter felt rehearsed, nights spent staring out at a skyline that no longer answered back. His penthouse, pristine and silent, had become more like a mausoleum than a home. That night the snow fell heavier, swirling in hypnotic spirals through the cones of light outside his windshield. Ben found himself staring at the storm as if it might swallow the whole city. He almost wished it would. At least then, his grief would be buried under something vast enough to match its weight. The soft jazz on the radio only deepened his solitude, each note an echo of the silence he carried inside. Then it came, a sound so faint he thought he imagined it. A cry. Not the wail of the wind, not the scrape of a branch, but raw human. He froze. His first instinct was to dismiss it. Cities were full of noises. Maybe it was a stray animal, maybe children lingering outside, though the storm made that unlikely. He reached for the radio knob, turning the volume higher, but the cry returned, sharper this time, weaving through the music and cutting straight into his chest. Ben's heart stuttered. He told himself to ignore it. This was not his problem. He had no obligation to anyone anymore. He had done his share of caring, and it had only ended in pain. But then another thought struck him. The cry, in its desperation, carried the sound of Olivia. Not the laughter he sometimes remembered in dreams, but the quivering, frightened voice she had used at night when storms rattled her windows. He could still hear her whisper, "Daddy, are you there?" His throat tightened, as if the past itself was calling him through the snow. The steering wheel creaked beneath his grip. Logic told him to drive away. Involvement meant risk, meant reopening wounds he had carefully buried. But his heart, long dormant, refused to let him go. He could not silence the echo of a child's fear, not when it felt so close to his own loss. He snapped off the radio, the sudden silence in the car as loud as thunder, and shoved open the door. The cold hit him like a blow, biting through his sweater and clawing at his skin. Snowflakes clung to his hair, stung his eyes, filled his lungs with ice. Still, he moved forward, guided only by that cry, now fainter but unmistakable. His boots crunched against the icy pavement as he crossed toward the park. His pulse quickened, not from fear, but from something he had not felt in years, a sense of urgency, of purpose. Near the playground, beneath the weak halo of a lamplight, he saw her. A small figure crouched in the snow, arms wrapped around her knees, hair plastered to her face. She looked like she was made of shadows and ice, fragile and breakable. Ben slowed, afraid of frightening her. When her head lifted, their eyes met for a single instant. Wide, terrified, yet alive with something raw and searching. Trust was too much to ask, but there was hope, faint and flickering. Ben knelt in the snow, ignoring the wet seeping through his pants. He removed his coat, holding it out as though it were an offering. His voice came low, steady, trembling with emotion he had not known he still possessed. "It is all right. I will not hurt you. I promise." For a moment she did not move, her small body coiled tight like a cornered animal. Snow swirled between them, the world narrowing to this fragile encounter. Then, with hands shaking, she reached forward. Her palm touched his, cold and trembling. Ben's chest ached as if the entire weight of the past years was pressing down. In that single contact, the storm hushed. She let him wrap the coat around her tiny frame, and when she leaned against him, exhausted, he felt the fragile heartbeat of a child who had every reason not to trust. He carried her carefully, her body so light it felt unreal, her breath shallow but present against his chest. At the SUV, he placed her gently in the passenger seat, fumbling to adjust the heater. She flinched at the seat belt, shrinking back, but he soothed her with quiet words. "You are safe here. Nobody will hurt you." She looked at him, eyes dark and uncertain, then whispered her name. "Emma." The name struck him like a chord, simple and beautiful, carrying all the weight of a child asking to be seen. He nodded, whispering back, "Thank you for telling me." His throat tightened as he reached for his phone, hands trembling as he dialed Rachel Kim, the one person he trusted with emergencies. His words came broken, uneven. "I found a child. Please meet me. No questions. 10 minutes." When he ended the call, he looked back at Emma. She sat curled beneath his coat, her fingers clutching it as though it might vanish. Her face was pale, bruises marking her skin, but in her eyes lingered a spark of life. She stared at her lap, silent except for the occasional sharp breath. Ben fought the urge to break down. This child, fragile yet fierce enough to run through a blizzard, had placed her survival in his hands. And for the first time since Olivia, he felt that maybe he still mattered. The city blurred past as he drove, windshield wipers scraping against the storm. Emma's head leaned against the seat, her breath fogging the window. Fear clung to her, shadowing every blink, but she stayed. She let herself exist in the warmth of the car, in the faint scent of cologne and leather, in the steadiness of a man who whispered promises he had once broken. Each mile carried them closer to something new, though neither of them knew it yet. The elevator rose in silence, its golden light humming softly above Ben's head as he carried Emma in his arms. Her body felt impossibly small, every shiver rattling through her bones as though she might splinter in his grasp. When the doors opened onto his penthouse, warmth spilled across polished wood floors, the quiet glow of lamps replacing the storm outside. He set her gently on the sofa, unwilling to let go but knowing she needed space. Rachel Kim was already waiting, her medical bag at her feet, concern etched into her face. She knelt beside Emma, her voice soft but firm, the kind of tone children instinctively trusted. Emma hesitated, her lips trembling as if even speaking might invite danger, before finally whispering her name. Rachel smiled gently, reassuring her, and began tending to the cuts and bruises with the steady patience of someone who had seen too much suffering and still believed in healing. Ben hovered nearby, awkward and restless. He had once commanded entire boardrooms, signed contracts worth millions with the flick of a pen, but here, facing a child's pain, he felt helpless. He fetched towels, poured water, adjusted the thermostat, anything to keep himself from breaking. He watched as Emma's shoulders flinched at each touch, then slowly eased as Rachel worked with quiet efficiency. Every small sign of trust felt like a victory. When Rachel finished, she led Emma to a guest bedroom, tucking her beneath flannel sheets and a heavy comforter. Ben lingered at the doorway, his chest tightening as he handed her a small teddy bear, one that had once belonged to Olivia. He told her it might help her sleep. Emma clutched it fiercely, her eyes closing within minutes, exhaustion pulling her into the deepest rest she had known in years. Ben stood there long after, watching the rise and fall of her breathing, until the ache in his chest became too much to bear. Days blurred into a new rhythm. The penthouse, once pristine and echoing, softened at the edges. Crayon drawings appeared on the refrigerator, lopsided suns and crooked houses taped with pride. The silence that had ruled for so long was broken by footsteps, by shy laughter that grew bolder each day. Emma's voice began to fill the halls, tentative at first, then brighter, as if she was relearning what it meant to be a child. Marissa and Rachel became fixtures in the home, not as staff or colleagues but as family. They baked cookies with Emma, taught her stories, braided her hair, and listened when she whispered secrets that carried the weight of her past. Ben found himself rushing home from meetings just to hear her laughter or watch her concentration as she pieced together puzzles at the kitchen table. Each sound of life, each mess left on the counter, became proof that his home was no longer a tomb of memories but a place alive again. Behind the warmth, however, shadows still lingered. Marcus Lane, Ben's head of security, worked quietly to gather evidence against Carl, uncovering neighbors' reports and records that painted a picture darker than Ben had imagined. Cheryl Stanton, their attorney, prepared for the courtroom battle with relentless precision. She listened to Emma's story with compassion, building the case piece by piece, promising no one would take Emma away without a fight. The day of the hearing came too quickly. The courthouse loomed gray and cold, its marble columns slick with melting snow. Emma sat beside Ben, her small body dwarfed by the wooden bench, clutching the teddy bear as Cheryl guided her through her testimony. Her voice was soft but steady as she spoke of fear, of the sound of boots on wood, of her mother's silence. When Cheryl placed Emma's secret journal before the judge, the childish handwriting told a story more powerful than any argument. Each page, filled with drawings and memories, bore witness to her survival. Denise broke under questioning, admitting what she had long denied. The courtroom gasped, Carl's composure cracked, and the verdict came swiftly. Emergency custody was granted to Ben, Carl was taken into custody, and Denise's rights were revoked. Emma turned to Ben with wide, trembling eyes, whispering, "I am really free now." Ben knelt to meet her gaze, tears stinging his vision, and promised, "You are free." What followed was not a perfect fairy tale, but something deeper. Adoption papers were signed. Emma's bedroom transformed into a sanctuary painted with swans and glowing with fairy lights. For the first time in her life, she had a door that closed behind her and a sign she painted herself. Home. The word was imperfectly written, smudged in places, but each letter carried the weight of a promise fulfilled. The penthouse grew louder, fuller. Marissa and Rachel became aunts in every way that mattered, filling afternoons with games, lessons, and laughter. Emma flourished, her laughter rounder, her trust bolder. She brought friends over, told stories of her past without flinching, and accepted comfort when it came. The scars did not vanish, but they no longer defined her. For Ben, healing came slowly in small moments. He found himself standing in the doorway to her room at night, listening to her steady breathing, remembering the silence that had once haunted him. He realized that life had not given him back what he had lost, but it had given him something just as precious, a second chance. Not to replace Olivia, but to honor her memory by loving Emma as fiercely as he once loved his daughter. On Christmas Eve, Emma crafted a paper angel, its wings uneven, its folds imperfect. Together they placed it at the top of the tree, and she whispered, "She is going to watch over us." Ben felt tears sting his eyes as he pulled her close. The penthouse glowed with warmth, the scent of cinnamon and pine filling every corner. For the first time in years, the house felt alive with love. Later, as he tucked her in beneath swan-print sheets, she hugged the teddy bear and whispered, "This is the best Christmas ever." Ben smoothed her hair, his heart full, and whispered back, "It is only the beginning." When the house fell quiet, he sat alone in the living room, gazing at the angel perched on the tree. Outside, snow fell steady and soft, covering the city in white. Inside, he whispered into the silence, words that had waited too long to be spoken. "The truth is, you saved me, Emma." And with that, the storm within him finally began to quiet. There are moments in life when everything feels broken beyond repair, when the silence of loss drowns out every reason to go on. For years, Ben Walker believed that was his fate. He buried himself in work, in routines, in the hollow comfort of wealth, convinced that the world had taken the only light he ever had. But then, on a frozen night when he least expected it, a child's cry pierced the storm and called him back to life. It was not a cry of weakness. It was the cry of someone who had endured too much and still chose to reach for hope. That cry changed everything. Emma's journey was not simple. She carried scars, visible and invisible, from a home that had never been safe. Yet even in the darkest hours, she found the courage to step into the storm. That single act of bravery opened the door to a future she never thought possible. And in saving herself, she gave Ben a chance to save himself too. Together, they discovered that healing does not erase the past, but it can transform the way the story ends. The walls of a penthouse once echoing with emptiness began to fill with laughter, drawings taped to refrigerators, and the scent of pancakes on quiet mornings. What had been a house of silence became a home alive with second chances. Emma learned what it felt like to be cherished, to belong, to wake up in a place where love was steady and promises were kept. Ben learned that grief does not have to be the end of love, but the beginning of a new way to carry it forward. This story reminds us that love has the power to break chains, that kindness can rebuild lives, and that sometimes the ones we save are also the ones who save us. It is a story about a little girl who found her voice and a man who found his heart again, proof that even in the coldest winters, warmth can return. If this journey touched you, let it stay with you. Let it remind you that hope is never lost and that family can be chosen, built not just by blood but by love. And if you believe, as we do, that stories like Emma's deserve to be told, we invite you to join us. Subscribe to Hidden Echo Stories because there are countless more tales of resilience, healing, and the quiet strength of ordinary people who become extraordinary. The next story might be the one your heart has been waiting for.